right, so we are live now, and welcome to Coffee Side Chat, everyone. If you start jumping on Facebook, or anyone who joins a little late on Zoom, welcome, or if you're watching the recording, welcome. Today I have with me Sueli Rivera, and Sueli is a registered mental health counseling intern and holds a master's of science degree in counseling psychology from Palm Beach University. Holds multiple certifications and training in TSCBT, that's trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, and EMDR, Gottman Level 1 for couples, and Prepare and Wrench Facilitator for couples as well. So she is very passionate about working with clients struggling with trauma, anxiety, depression, self-esteem, and relational issues, utilizing a holistic approach and able to interweave past, present, and practical skills to help clients change their narrative and their stories. So thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Shannon. I'm so excited to be with you.
Yeah, and today I'm really excited about this topic today because I think it's something that we don't talk about enough, and I think it's something that a lot of us don't understand, and that's on trauma. So I first want to back up for a moment. How did you have a silver lining or a bright spot of why you got into this line of business in the first place?
Well, it's a really unique story. So I am a child of a parent who has a severe mental illness. And so growing up, I witnessed manic episodes and delusion, but I was never really explained what was going on. My father did a really great job of trying to shield me or protect me from it. But unfortunately, it left me constantly feeling in high alert. And so as I became a teenager and my parents divorced and the family unit separated, I just realized that I just didn't have the safe place to really process a lot of pain and hurt and shame, because I was really, at times, really struggling with the things that would occur in these episodes and what people would see. And so though I had a great faith-based community and a great pastor at that time in my life, it was really difficult because they weren't equipped. The pastoral care wasn't equipped for this type of situation. And, I'm 40. And so 18 years ago, mental health wasn't as discussed, especially in the Latin community. And so I became this angry teenager who began to rebel and really struggle. And that angry teenager turned into an angry young adult who did risky behaviors and just unhealthy coping mechanisms with food and drinking and toxic behavior and relationships. And so I became that epitome of, a hurt person hurting people. And so as I got older, I got introduced to counseling. At around 25, I went for the first time and dealt with some of my young adult years. But then fast forwarding, after having my daughter, I started having postpartum. And I was really unfulfilled with my career. I was a medical administrator, and through counseling, it really showed me that I had a passion to want to be that safe place for someone. And so I went back to school, and at Palm Beach Atlantic University, they really emphasize on us doing our self-care, so and our personal work. And so I really dove in those 2.5 years into it. And long story short, it was really because of my own story and my own traumas, and experiencing that and not feeling like I had a place to share it and being misunderstood. Instead of someone seeing my hurt and pain, I was this angry person to them. So.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that too. It's oftentimes, I always ask what's the silver lining or the story, because anyone who gets into a line of work whenever they're really passionate about it, and I can tell that you are, it's usually because something is leading. They've either experienced someone who has felt that passion, or they've either experienced being close to someone who have struggled with something, or they've struggled with it themselves. Is usually where that comes from. So let's dive into trauma, because I really want to talk about it. What is the easiest definition, that, because we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, we talk about all these different things related to trauma, and just for a regular me
everyday
to understand, what is that?
So what I like to do is I believe in simplifying it as well. So trauma, it can be a one-time event or a recurring event, or in a long-term time span. And I really liked how a psychologist said this. They said they describe it as this overwhelming, it's overwhelming the normal human response because of an abnormal event. So meaning like trauma occurs because we feel overwhelmed by a threat or a risk of a threat to ourselves, to our family, or the surroundings we're in. And so in essence, that's what trauma is that perceived threat or risk.
Yeah. So, and then are there different levels of trauma? Like, I guess I have two different thoughts in my mind. I have someone who was bullied as a child. That's one side of it. And then someone who has seen a traumatic accident, or they've gone to war, or, they've seen those actual, are there different classifications of trauma also?
So yes, in counseling, we sometimes in our field, you'll hear it referred to as big T's and little T's.
Mm-hmm.
So big T's will be like that plane crash, or that sudden death, a tragic death that someone witnesses, or being in a bank when a robbery occurs, right? So this is those big T's, a life-threatening illness, sexual assault. And then we have like what they call those little T's, which is more like that personal event that occurs, like the loss of a relationship, when there's that sudden divorce, or the loss and tragic event, sometimes the loss of a pet. So you'll hear us classify it like that. When I'm talking with clients though, I always just say it's a trauma for them, because I don't ever want them to feel like it minimizes what's happened to them, because for them, it's really real and raw.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to my next question. If someone has, like, let's just say there's two different types of people. If someone has a trauma that occurs, and let's just say a pet dies, versus someone who's gone through a huge T trauma, is it possible for those reactions to be the same, or to have those same type of responses regardless if it's a little T or big T?
Absolutely. So what we realize is that though someone can witness, like you said, someone can witness a death and not have such a significant
responses, regardless if it's a little T.
Not have such a significant reaction to it, whereas someone who loses a pet could really be struggling. So some of the things that you see in reactions, I always tell people, you think about it in 4 categories: emotional, behavioral, cognitively, and physiologically, right? So in all of that, you can see someone who is going through avoidance, isolation, their routine changes. You can see someone become hypervigilant, or even very, and hypervigilant meaning that exaggerated startle reaction to things, angry, irritable, having outbursts. But for that person, that's their trauma, and and everyone processes trauma differently. So for instance, that's why you hear some soldiers who will have like PTSD, where others, they've been in combat for years and don't have any symptoms or signs of PTSD. Each of us really process trauma differently. And so, so we could have the very same reaction that someone has with, for instance, a big T, with a little T.
Wow. Yeah, that's really powerful. And I've seen that. I've seen two people go through the same exact situation and two completely different responses to those situations. So let's just say someone's listening, and let me check the comments. We are live for anyone who's watching. There's just a lag on Facebook. Someone put in a comment asking if this is live. Yes. So welcome. Thank you everyone for watching on Facebook as well. And just to get you caught up, we've been talking a little bit about trauma and what trauma means and how there's different levels of trauma. So let's just say someone's listening and they said, wow, like I do have trauma. How would someone well, first of all, let's back up. How would someone even identify that they have it? Is there flashbacks, or, because I personally, for me, in the past, I have gone through some crap which we all have. And sometimes you have those flashbacks, or sometimes you might wake up in the middle of the night and you might think about that thing from years ago. Would that be considered a trauma, or?
So absolutely. So again, that goes back to everyone has like the different natural reactions or reactions to those events that happen in their life or the experience that happens. And so, yeah, you can have that re-experiencing where you have flashbacks or you have nightmares. So sometimes it'll even be impacting people's sleep. And so, and then what'll happen is there'll be even those who were dealing with trauma in childhood never really processed it, but it can create intimacy issues with people, or communication issues. And so
Right.
What I tell people is sometimes you want to really pay attention and hone into what's happening with your body, because your body, there's a great book that we read, The Body Keeps Score, and that book really tells us that, yeah, isn't it great?
I love it. Yes.
Systematically we hold those things. So sometimes our body will tell us something's off with us. And we'll see that sometimes when we're constantly feeling anxious, or we're cycling through maybe some people they'll pick on because they feel constantly anxious or on high alert. So that hyperarousal that occurs. So it's very interesting because different people do react differently, but there are those telltales of like re-experiencing like flashbacks and nightmares.
Yeah, and I'll put that, once we're done with our video, I'll put the book in there in case anyone's wanting to go read it. I believe it's on Audible too. That's where I listen on it. Yeah, it's a very good book. So do you feel that everyone has experienced trauma at least once in their life?
Ooh, I love this question. So this is the beauty about our field, right? In science, one person will say yes and another will say no. And my gut instinct says yes. In some way, shape, or form, we've experienced some type of trauma.
I agree with you. I agree too. Yeah.
But there's those few people out there who maybe they've only dealt maybe with grief, where it's that natural loss, because of course we have that cycle of life where it's, birth and then the loss of death. So we don't want to confuse grief with trauma. But there might be those few out there that say they haven't really had a major traumatic event, but my gut is to say yes.
Yeah. And now you're leading me down. I'm just so intrigued by this type of stuff. I'm going to touch on grief for just a moment. If there is a loss that is early, that's unexpected, that can be interrelated with grief and trauma interrelated together, right?
Absolutely, especially if let's say the death was tragic. Let's say that your loved one died in a car accident unexpectedly, and so you normally we see like the deputies will come to the door, and so there's this trauma of I'm dealing with the loss of my loved one and this traumatic event, or if you witness it, or if you were part of the car, so there's multiple ways. So yeah, they can really be intertwined.
Yeah, and the human brain and our emotions, reactions, everything is so intricate and so complicated. I like that we're complicated, but sometimes we just can't figure ourselves out. So I don't even know if there's a direct response to this, since it's a lot of working through therapy. But if someone is experiencing some type of trauma, do you have like one best tip of just where to start to help overcome and heal?
What I tend to tell people, friends, and just people along the way, community that I'm around, I usually tell people it's never a wrong time to sit with a mental health practitioner. Whether it's a therapist or a psychologist, but really being able to sit with someone who can hold that safe space with you, really provide that comfort or what you need, whether it's to talk or cry or sit in silence, because a lot of times in trauma there aren't words. And so then getting that psychoeducation so you can understand, they're able to help you understand what's happening to your body. What are you feeling? What are these what's that ruminating thought? Why is it still occurring? Because it allows you to feel like you're not crazy. They normalize it. They help normalize what your body is going through. And so my best tip is always to tell people, really don't be afraid to go into counseling and really have that extra support, because a lot of times they'll even want to collaborate with your family if you're comfortable with it, and allow you to really process it in a family unit, or even providing a referral for consultation for marriage if it's impacting your marriage or your children. Mm-hmm. So I would say the best tip is to really find someone that you connect with, because every therapist has their own style, and everyone has their own area that they really feel is an expertise for them. So you really want to find someone who works with trauma, and really can hone in on what you need at that time.
Yeah, that's really good. And I always say, you made a comment earlier that reminds me of, don't be afraid to seek out a mental health counselor. And there's a lot of judgment we're both in the helping field, and there's a lot of judgment with someone who is seeking out. They think something's wrong with them. And it's like, and we said earlier, everyone, that our opinions, even though some research combats otherwise, that everyone at some point experiences some type of trauma. Mm-hmm. We have another question that's come in as well. Thanks. So here's the question. My dad was killed 5 years ago. He died in an accident, accidental shooting in the middle of the night. So sorry to hear that, Ashley.
So sorry to hear that.
I was not only grief-stricken, but also traumatized as an event as a whole. Mm-hmm. So what recommendations do you have for something like that, or, for that experience?
Well, when someone is coming in with that, because that's a perfect example of what we were talking about earlier, where there's this grief and there's this trauma, depending on the whole scenario, of course, of how it took place, where it took place. Really having them come in and be able to share what's presently going on, or how are they having triggers now? Are they having any experiences where they're afraid to go to sleep, and if it's in the same home, so it's really that coming in, really understanding what took place, their story, and then helping them to cope, and just walking alongside them where they have the tools that they need, but also be able to process it through, whether it's through journaling, different techniques that are out there for trauma as well. So it would really be important for her. And I always tell people, even if something happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago, trauma triggers can still happen in your life. So I always tell people, kind of like cars, we go and we take our cars and we do checkups, and sometimes even mentally we need to do that the same way we go for our annuals for our physical health. We really should even do that mentally. Like, am I being anxious more or dealing with some things? So even 5 years ago, having her go in and really connect with her therapist, or connect with a therapist, and really discuss what's going on and see if there's unresolved trauma or unresolved grief that she still needs to go through the stages of.
Yeah, and she also said, should I see someone, or is this normal to still experience that 5 years ago, from something 5 years ago?
I would tell her to go see someone, not because of, and I always say, what's normal, right? Because everyone's experience is
different. No such thing as normal, yeah.
Yeah. I laugh now when people are like, new normal. I'm like, what is normal?
Yeah, it doesn't even exist. Yeah.
But with her, I would tell her it would be great to connect with a therapist just to see what's going on, and they can really sit with her, consult, see the overall picture. Where is it? What's been impacted in her life emotionally, physically, cognitively? So I would say, yeah, it's never too late to go in. I tell people sometimes who experience childhood traumas that it's never too late to come in as an adult, because sometimes the biggest thing that can happen is you want to be able to change your story and that narrative from, let's say, a victim mentality of why did this happen to me, or why me, or and change it to that survivor mentality of this isn't going to define me. It's not taking my power away. And so sometimes I tell people it's never too late to go. And it's never a wrong reason to just check in and see what's going on.
Yeah. And I know we're going over, so let me know if—
No, I'm good. Don't worry.
Yeah, if we're, because I have another question too, is so really there's no timeline on— now let's just say there is— I want to talk about suicide for a second, because I know that touches many of us. And so if someone is experiencing some type of trauma or some type of loss related to that unexpected event, um, is there a too soon or a too— but like what would be considered— is there a time frame where someone has to sit with their feelings, or do you recommend that people go in right away when you're experiencing stuff like that? Because I feel like that also is put into— well, that definitely is put into like a car accident category.
Mm-hmm.
And would people long term, like, would you long term go and see a counselor, for example? Like, let's just say 20 years later, is it normal to still need to seek someone 20 years later? And I'm asking this on behalf of everyone, because I think that some people think that it's been too long and why am I not over this yet? I feel like we all hold that judgment a little bit. So I'm not sure. That was a long-winded around.
Don't worry.
but what are your thoughts on stuff like that?
So it goes back to that everyone deals with things. So some people will have a rapid response and some will have that delay response where they kind of need to sit with it. And what I tell people too is, especially if you are the family member or the spouse or whatever the case may be, there is no time frame. You've got to allow it, allow their process. And so the best that we can do, even in that, if it's not us, or let's say we're just witnessing our family go through it, is really being, again, just giving them what they need at that time. If it's a place to cry, if it's a place to be quiet, and even as the victim or the person who, or the survivor of the trauma, it's the same thing. You deciding, okay, it's time for me to deal with this. And then going to the other part of your question of, is it too late? I think it's never too late. And we can, let's say, go to counseling. I went to counseling to deal with some things, right? And then in my master's program, I'm in counseling because they required it of us to do our personal work.
I love that.
And yeah, it was best thing ever. And so in the midst of that, I realized that I had some trauma triggers, things that I thought were resolved or I thought I had done some work. They were manifesting in different ways, like, a cohort or someone in the cohort triggered a moment of feeling of rejection or abandonment. And then you see that inner child that wants to come out and be that angry person again. And so I tell people that the trauma itself, the experience, it's there, it's real for you. And so there will be triggers, but it's really always having those tools and learning new things, because science is always changing and because our field is always learning new things and new techniques. It's okay to go back in and not have shame if you feel, because I've had that where I'm like, why am I still feeling this way?
Yeah.
We're human and we're complex. We're just complex beings.
Yeah, it's totally normal to have these feelings and these triggers bubble up years down the road. It's normal.
Absolutely.
Like, and it's random. It's very random. It happens, you're in the shower and you're like, where did that come from? I don't know where that came from. So, yeah, it's very interesting. And, I appreciate everything. I'm sure everyone else listening appreciates it as well. If anyone— I know this is a little bit of a delay, but if anyone has questions coming through on Facebook, feel free to ask. If you are uncomfortable asking on Facebook, then send me a private message and I could get that information over to Sue. She'd be happy to help you, I'm sure. And
Absolutely.
then also, my last question for you is, if someone's listening and they're like, I love her, how do people find you?
Oh, you're so sweet. So I am in the Lake Nona area. actually near Botsy Park. I'm with a Christian nonprofit organization right now that we operate out over there. And again, we're not pushers of our faith. We are counselors, but we're here to help. We believe in that holistic approach of mind, body, and spirit. But if you don't have a belief system, that's okay. It's about making sure you're getting that collaborative help or us just walking alongside you. And so I can actually be reached. It's called Broken Wings, and I can be reached there. And I can provide the number. It's 321-701-3064.
Okay.
Or you guys can find me on social media by my name, Swelly Rivera, or on Instagram, it's Bloom with Sue. And
Sorry, what was the Instagram handle?
Bloom with Sue.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm just writing all this down so I can put it in the notes afterwards.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a delayed question. And this is probably good for everyone who's experiencing some type of trauma, some type of event, who have children. Is it okay to share feelings with a child? Maybe, or what's the right age? What's the right step to tell the truth of 100% of something that happened? Or do you sugarcoat? What's the right response for that?
You want to talk to the child at the level that they're at, right? So I have a 7-year-old, and explaining, for instance, what we're dealing with the coronavirus right now, the COVID-19. I had to explain it to her at her level. So making sure that you come down to their level and don't overly explain, allow them the space to ask questions. And then you can actually see how they're processing it just by their questions at times, and know it's okay to share what's gone on. But depending on where they're at, sometimes we overestimate what a child can handle or underestimate. Just depends on the age. So I always tell people, really talk to them at the level that they're at, not giving them more than they can really handle, or that they don't comprehend in their little world, especially for our young ones.
Yeah. Thank you. So I wanted to get that last one in before we got off. Okay. So awesome. So you're located at Broken Wings. I will put all your information in here. Guys, anyone listening, if this is something that you feel like you need, please reach out to anyone, and reach out to someone to get that support, or reach out to Sue if you've really connected with her on this conversation. And I mean, I just want to leave you with, take the judgment out, and you can heal, and it's okay to heal. And any trauma that you've experienced yourself or someone else that you've witnessed, they would want you to heal, and you really want you to heal.
Absolutely.
So take that opportunity life is short. Take the opportunity to try to heal. Take your time and give yourself grace in this whole process, because life can be pretty sucky sometimes. I'm sure we can all agree to that. But that's why God put people like Sue on this earth.
So sweet.
So we can have that
process.
So we can have that support. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. This has been very insightful, not only for me, but I'm sure for a lot of people who are listening in. And if you're watching the replay, feel free to shoot me over a question. If I don't have the answer for you, then I'll get it over to Sue.
Absolutely. Shannon, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this, and I really agree with you. I really hope that people will really hone in on their healing, because you want to live your best life, you really do. And so I appreciate you doing something like this where we can talk about these type of topics.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day. Cheers on the coffee, and cheers. And everyone have a safe and productive day, and we will see you next week. Thanks. Bye.